what's the things that you think about there to really try and be in your utmost awareness and embodiment of that, so that you find that balance quite nicely between that integrated king, not being a pushover, but not being too tyrannical? And what do you think are some of the things to think about there?
That's a good question. I think, first of all, it's okay to have some kind of tension about it, because you're always learning how to do that. And, that can be really difficult to figure it out. But, men are trying to find an identity most of the time. Like, what's the man that I can be proud of? What's the narrative of manhood and masculinity I can be proud of? And a lot of times you get pushed into these two extremes. So if you go back historically, so there's a book, a lot of books that talk about this. One of them is Iron John by Robert Bly. It's a great just book about masculinity and manhood. It's really beautifully written. He talks about like the 50s and 60s man who's the patriarch. And then we had such a negative relationship with that, emotionally stunted, just works and comes home and puts his feet up on the couch guy who wasn't engaged to, in the 70s, this very effeminate man who didn't want to do any of those things, who ended up being overly passive, nice, like the nice guy who, confrontation can be very loving, but niceness avoids a confrontation because you want to be liked and you don't want to cause waves. That eventually leads to mistrust and a lack of integrity. So it's like we overreact and we have these two extremes, and I do feel like our society puts forth one or the other. Like, which man are you going to be? Are you going to be, the kind of Andrew Tate stereotype, which I don't think Andrew Tate is the stereotype that people put him as. He's more complicated, but when you hear someone talking negatively about that guy, they're always talking about, it's just about money, power, being unforgiving, and harsh, and the big lifestyle of like having a lot of stuff and being really successful. And a lot of guys really connect to that. If they don't have a story of masculinity they can buy into, it's like, well, that sounds like something that maybe I can be proud of or aspire to. At least looks good. So I'm going to go there. Or if they've been hurt by that, or they're getting affirmation from women for this really passive side of things, or they feel really guilty about men's cultural history throughout time. Because I think our culture speaks that message too, especially for like white men, because I'm a middle-class white man. So I came in born with a legacy that was not that great. Okay, there's ravaging of Native American Indians, there's enslavement of African Americans, there's oppression of women. There's still a lot of that stuff that lingers around. So I had to figure out, but I am that guy who's born into that lineage and look just like all those guys. So what do I want to do now? Do I just want to be that really passive, weak guy and just say, I have no point in life, I don't matter, I shouldn't even be here anymore, I'm going to let everyone else take the reins now because of my heritage? So, like, where do you go? And I think that the correct narrative is always rooted in love. And love is not soft. It's really tough, right? So it means, being honest but being kind at the same time. So you want to tell the truth, especially if it's hard and uncomfortable. It's hard for me to do this at work, especially, if I have an employee that's underperforming, to have the honest conversation of, we got to address like work performance issues or what's going on with you. I have to tell him a negative thing or her a negative thing about themselves. But I want to be kind. Like, honesty is not licensed to be a jerk. So I want to be kind at the same time. Like, I want to be understanding of somebody else and empathize, but I don't want to be passive either if I need to butt up against that. Confidence is great, but when confidence turns to arrogance, it's not. So you want to have those good things. Like, I want to be humble. I love humility. I think most good men, they need to be humble, but I don't want to be insecure about that. So you have these juxtapositions of these good things with the toxic perversion or the extreme. So, you brought up that book, having that balance where you can be, stoical, but you can also be empathetic when you need to be. You can be really aggressive when you're called on to be aggressive, but you also have temperance. Like, how to curb that. I want men to be calm and bring calm into their lives and be that rock. I also want men to be wild and a little bit fierce and a little bit, I want to say, unpredictable, and having a balance of those things. So you're having a good relationship with both
Yeah.
extremes, and figuring out like, where is my balance? And that's, I don't know if that answers your question that well, but it's a really complicated question and really nuanced, and it looks different for every man, because every human being has a different level of masculine and feminine within them. Men are generally more masculine and women are generally more feminine, but I wouldn't even call myself a really masculine man. I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle. So my masculine traits are going to look different. They're going to have a different, what I would call like a feminine curve to them.
Yep.
Right. But this is just human ways of putting these things into boxes. Like, oh, that's feminine.
That's right.
That's masculine. Yeah. So men can't do that. And if they do, they're womanly. And if women do that, they're being a man. No, we made that up. Having a healthy balance and you and your partner complementing each other and appreciating it instead of seeing it as the enemy is part of that process. It's really important.
All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.